So yeah, I'll just give a bit of an intro on myself. I've got a few slides to go through the day, and then I'll hand over to Stuart from TransparentChoice to introduce himself and take us through the main context and main content of this webinar. So bear with me for a couple of minutes and we'll get to the fun stuff, I'm sure. So iCoTech Group, so we're a Microsoft implementation partner, but we specialize in SharePoint, Power BI and Project Online. So as you'll see in a few minutes, we're PPM practitioners at heart. We love delivering change. It's something that we've all done and we all relish in, but we take that experience and apply that to Project Online, which is a PPM tool available within Office 365. We love data as well, so what we use Power BI to capture that data from that tool, plus other tools like TransparentChoice and SharePoint and other CRM and applications that are available to you. And we like to blend that data together to visually represent it to our customers to allow them to make informed decisions. All right, so in being a Microsoft partner and delivering those complex solutions, we obviously have experience in doing other things as well, like Power Apps, Power Automate, Exchange, Dynamic CRM, and all those other things that come with the O365 pack. Just out of interest as well, if many of you are on YouTube, if you find iCoTech services on YouTube, you can subscribe, and we do share this content, a few thought-provoking vlogs as well, and a few set of guides on Teams and other things like that. So yeah, search for us on YouTube and do us a favor and subscribe, because we're trying to grow our subscription rates over there as well, which is great. So a bit of background on myself and iCoTech. So I started off in the PMO well over a decade ago now in Welsh Water, utilities company here in Wales. I did a short stint in Lloyds Banking Group as a project management function, working on the TSB sale of Lloyds Bank, which was really interesting. I spent a large proportion of my time in Babcock International Group, moving around Babcock, delivering portfolios of global change across the world, which was really exciting. I stepped out as a consultant into Companies House and had my first experience of real public sector here in the UK. That was a really good experience. Spent a year there helping them through a major digital transformation change journey, which was fantastic. And then I really formed iCoTech then at that point. And now we have a really strong client base, including Bays, Intellectual Property Office, ONS, and the manufacturers of Yorkshire Tea, which is really good. So yeah, it's grown from strength to strength, and we've got some really diverse customers, changing the way they deliver change, which is what we try and do. So our kind of motto, I guess, or vision statement is delivering value at pace. So we do take the agile principles and the GDS principles here in government in the UK. And we use the best tools, the best systems. We're always sharing ideas, so I'm really passionate about facilitating these sessions where we can get experts like Stuart in front of your communities like this, and we can share the way in which we deliver, and all learn from each other. I think it's a really good idea. So we like to collaborate. We do lots of research and we innovate all the time, so always finding new ways of doing things. And we always employ people or connect people with people who are great at collaborating and share the same values as us here at iCoTech. So that's how we operate, and we're always learning, as I say. So we're always learning from our mistakes and improving the way in which we deliver our services. So the portfolio community then, so this is the first one we've had to do virtually. Last time it was in January, it was held face to face. Obviously COVID-19 across the globe's had a major impact, so this time we've had to do it virtually, but thank you very much for attending, and Geraint will be sending out some content and collateral after this event as well. One of the last sessions we did was about delivering projects in Office 365. It was really interesting to me to see that Office 365 is such a powerful tool. We're all using it and we're all collaborating using Word, using Office, using OneNote and Teams as we are today to collaborate and connect. But actually, when you look at the amount of tools available to deliver projects in Office 365, it's quite surprising. I was doing this for an event I hosted last week. But one of the things I want to draw your attention to is that a little known product called Project Online, which is a PPM tool. So lots of people I talk to don't even know that Project Online exists and it's available to them. So within a couple of clicks and a couple of license purchases, you can have an enterprise-wide portfolio management system that allows you to kind of prioritize your investments, to look at your projects, capture your risks, capture your issues, and track overall portfolio performance across your organization. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of snippets here of the tool itself. So here you've got a plan, a schedule. If anybody's used Microsoft Project, this is like Microsoft Project and SharePoint on steroids, effectively combined. And it allows you to report and store project information and then report on that across the portfolio. So you can see here a snapshot, a little screenshot, sorry, of the tool itself. So you can see it's very much SharePoint focused. You've got each of those items there are a project within the information technology department, automated RAGs, statistics about the project, and you can see all the other functions that I won't go into at this time that you could perform on this tool. So one of the things that people often ask me is, how do I plan a project in Project Online without using Microsoft Project? Because Microsoft Project's a bit overwhelming. Well, what we can do is build this little view here, this little scheduling view in the browser that's a light touch for managing projects. So it's really useful if you're doing continuous improvement and other areas of change and not using 200-line schedules in Microsoft Project. The other thing that happens in the system is you get a project site associated to each of those lines you saw earlier on. And here you can see we're capturing risks, we're capturing issues, deliverables, documents, and you can share this with most people across your organization as well. So, when you're asked for, all the risks across your portfolio, you can easily visualize them in a Power BI report. And that's why we're trying to do this. So we're trying to capture all this data in one place so we can create some really nice looking, interactive, live, one version of the truth set of reports. So this is our motto. We like that one version of the truth. We like to be able to put data in once and pull it out in multiple different environments, multiple different reports. And we all hate those days. If you're into delivering projects and you're a project manager, program manager, the Friday doing your status report is always that dreaded day when you're updating the Word document or the Excel document, and you're taking your risks from your risk log, you're taking your milestones from your plan, you're putting some context in there, and you're sending it to your stakeholder, and your stakeholder notices a spot, a gap. That project shouldn't be red there. That should be, that should be green. And we've all been there where that's a painful moment, and the dreaded Friday morning highlight report day, as it used to be in Babcock back in the day for me. So here you press refresh, you see one version of the truth, the data comes out, and you're focusing on the content of the report, not the production of it, which is really key. All right. So that's it from me. My name is Joel Markham. So joel.markham@iCoTechservices.co.uk. Visit the website or connect with Stuart or Geraint or any of us on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have there on out on Project Online or any PPM tool across Office 365. So at this point, I'm going to stop presenting, and I'm going to hand over to Stuart. Thanks, Stuart.
Excellent. Great. So thanks, Joel. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
The vagaries of remote. All right. So the fact that we all get to sit at home and have sessions like this, to me, is a huge benefit of the current crisis. There's some really dreadful things happening right now, but there's some cool stuff. So welcome to my home. I've put this little screen up behind so that you can't see the chaos and mayhem that is my family life. School is just out. If we get interrupted, I apologize in advance. So let's jump in. Who am I, and why on earth am I here? So we partner with Team iCoTech, and we're a leading software vendor in the space of project prioritization and demand management and all that kind of good stuff. So very much complementary to the Microsoft Project Server that Joel was talking about, where there's a lot of focus on execution and reporting. And what we do is we bring best practice to the bit before that, the bit where you're selecting projects and picking projects. I also guest lecture at the University of Oxford on the topic of project prioritization. And as we go through this, prioritization is going to be one of the common themes, one of the critical success factors in effectively responding to this COVID environment, the COVID situation. Everything's been said about COVID. I'm not going to go on about what it is or how it's impacting everybody. It's a mess. But I believe that the PMO has an opportunity here to actually add a huge amount of value, and that's what we're going to explore today. So basically, through our partners and through some direct conversations with customers, we've probably touched a couple of hundred CIOs around the world over the last few weeks, and my guess is that the answers that the CIOs are giving to what are you most concerned about would apply to anybody who is senior leadership in any large organization. So the three questions that we're hearing again and again are, what do I need to do right now to keep the wheels turning? The second question is, what can I stop, or what is it safe to stop or postpone? Because somehow you got to stop something to free up resources to deliver all this emergency stuff, right? So you have to stop something. I was talking to a mobile provider last week, and they were telling me that they delivered a year's worth of network upgrades to their mobile network. They delivered a year's worth of upgrades in 2 weeks. And when the CEO turned around to the COO and said, "Gee, you never told me you could do it in 2 weeks. Why don't we do that all the time?" The COO's response was, "Because we did nothing else. That's all we did." Right? So you've got to stop something in order to do all the emergency stuff. And then the third question that we're hearing a lot, the third issue that we're hearing all the time is, how do I transition to the new normal? The world is going to be different post-COVID. None of us really knows what that means yet. We don't really know how it's going to be different, but it is going to be different. And there's probably going to be a transition from where we are today back to kind of the eventual new normal. And so the leadership are always, they're asking these questions so that they know what to do now and what they need to do for the future. And what's really interesting to me is that these are all questions about strategic alignment and project prioritization and resources. And so I said prioritization was going to come in here, and this makes sense, right? You've got to figure out where are we going to allocate our resources to have maximum impact. You have to do that every day, right? But during a crisis, it's even more important. And so because this is about strategic alignment, project prioritization, this is all stuff that the PMO should be doing, should know about, should be involved in. And that would be true on a business as usual basis, right? The PMO should be involved in prioritizing projects, not making the decision, but facilitating the process. But these aren't normal times. Right now, the rate of change is incredible. Every day there's news. There are updates on, whether or not people are infectious. There are updated guidance on how close can we stand, how often can you go out, are we going to let people go to school or are we not? Those kind of things. It's changing all the time. And the decisions we're making in the context of great uncertainty. Right? Nobody knows what the future is going to look like. And when that happens, there's something really interesting that happens to your decision makers, which is that the biases, the decision biases that we're all subject to, get amplified. Right? If you're pushing somebody to make decisions quickly and you're doing it with great uncertainty, there are decisions about what they do, what they don't do. They're going to do what they're comfortable with. They're going to repeat patterns of behavior from the past. They're going to do all kinds of things that are biased behaviors and decisions that aren't necessarily appropriate in this situation. So we're going to look at how we should be thinking about prioritization. And the place to start, I think, is to look at the way people are prioritizing projects today in sort of business as usual settings. So let's move on and just ask the question about those current ways of prioritizing projects. Are they effective? So what are these different ways of prioritizing? It can be anything from some organizations write a business case, some organizations have kind of a pitch fest, a Dragon's Den type thing. Other organizations have more formal spreadsheet-based, weighted spreadsheet scoring systems. And the bad news is that none of those tools is particularly effective at prioritizing projects. You get an answer, yes, but you don't necessarily get a good answer. So this data comes from the PMI, and pretty much everything else we're going to talk about today is driven by real research. So this is data from the PMI. So 1 in 5 projects are waste. Now, the phrase in the PMI report was something like projects that are so badly aligned with goals that they should be stopped tomorrow, right? That's a pretty disastrous definition of a state for a project to be in. And yet, in a typical portfolio, 20% of your projects fall into that category. So clearly those tools that the industry has used for years and years and years aren't very effective. And at the same time, half of projects are not resourced properly, and we all know what happens when you put too many resources too many projects, into the mix. People start juggling, and then they start dropping things, and everything ends up on the floor, and that's not a good place to be. And so the answer, and again, this is PMI data. So the answer seems really obvious, right? If we can identify which projects are not aligned with our strategy, with our goals, and stop doing them, that frees up resources that we can then put into projects up in the top left quadrant here. So these are projects that are important, but that are not doing very well. They're not being executed very well. If we can take the resources from here and move them up to there, then we can turn those projects into successful projects, right? And we can just get more value delivered to the organization safely, predictably, reliably. So this is great. This is kind of obvious. This is motherhood and apple pie. Gee, Stuart, you don't need to be a lecturer at Oxford to come up with that one, right? But there's a slight problem, and that problem is this sort of strategic fit, right? So how do you judge which projects you should be doing? Which are the ones that actually add real value? How do you measure value? What's the definition? Whose definition do you use? If you go to your leadership team and you go around the table and ask them quietly, what do you think is, what criteria would you use to define the most valuable projects? You're going to get different answers from those people. And in fact, if you've got 6 people from the leadership team and you ask them that question on Monday, you'd get 6 different answers. And if you ask them that question the following Monday, you'd probably get 6 slightly different answers, right? So this is something where you have to, you need some way of getting everybody together, getting the executives all on the same team, getting them aligned, and sort of doing it rationally and I was going to say permanently, that's the wrong word, but doing it in a way that you have a record and it's an artifact that you can use to drive your prioritization. And it may surprise you to find out that this is hard enough. This is a difficult enough problem that it's turned into quite a rich source of academic research in business schools and schools of engineering around the world. It typically falls into those two. And a couple of years ago, the University of New South Wales actually pulled together a bunch of the research from over the last decade or two into how to do project prioritization and how to align projects with your goals. And they looked at over 100 different methodologies. So they looked at weighted spreadsheets and they looked at writing down a business case and all of these things. And they discovered that the vast majority of them aren't very effective. They really don't work that well. And there were only 2 methods that they looked at that did work, that were suitable. Suitable was their word. One is called DEA, and that's a decision science methodology. It's kind of difficult to use. The other one is AHP, and that's the one that we use in our product. And again, that's a different decision science methodology. It's easier to use, and it's pretty transparent and quick. So from that, I guess the takeaway is that this AHP thing is kind of the best practice when you're prioritizing. And we sort of and we've said earlier on that picking the things to do when you're in a crisis is one of the absolutely most critical steps that you need to take. And in fact, the top 3 questions from all those CIOs were all prioritization questions. Right? What do we need to prioritize and get going? What do we need to prioritize to stop? And what do we need to prioritize to transform into the new normal? So this is about AHP and prioritization, and this is the way to go when you're running your annual or your quarterly or your semi-annual budgeting and prioritization process. But this isn't business as normal. Normal command and control structures don't really work in a crisis. Things have to go much quicker and there's more uncertainty. So we need a little bit more help here to sort of think about how to structure this and how to respond. And Transparent Choice is part of the McKinsey collaboration network. So I'm going to draw on some of the McKinsey research here, and they've published a couple of papers. You can Google these. Joel, I think, is going to publish the slides, so you can take it from the slides when they come around. But these are a couple of papers that are really good about how to respond in a crisis, and in particular around COVID. And fundamentally, what it comes down to is there's this notion of what McKinsey calls a nerve center. So the idea is that you pull together a senior level group to act as a coordinating group, the nerve center hub. And then around them, you create a number of empowered teams, each of which has a particular domain that they care about. So if you're a retailer, for example, in this example, you might have one group that looks at vendors and vendor relationships, another one that looks at store operations, another that looks at logistics, and so on. And the idea is that these teams need to be moving quickly. They need to be empowered to make decisions, because if you have a traditional command and control type structure during a crisis, you're just too slow. And this model is actually built on work that came out of, I think it was the Korean War, research that came out of the Korean War in how to respond quickly to rapidly changing environments. So, you know, it really is designed from the ground up to be looking at these kind of rapidly changing environments in the context of high uncertainty, which is where we are today. So this model kind of makes sense. You know, you're empowering teams to respond quickly, to prioritize the risks within their own domain and to come up with solutions. But there's a problem, which is how do you keep these stovepipes, right? Because in normal times, we wouldn't call these empowered working groups, we'd call them stovepipes. And so how do you keep these stovepipes aligned? How do you make sure that they're pulling in the same direction? How do you exercise, you know, if you've just empowered them to go and do stuff, how do you then exercise any degree of governance over them? Right. So if you're not careful, this is a roadmap not to dealing with a crisis, but it's a roadmap to chaos. So this is where something like AHP can really come into its own and help. So kind of the first step, if you like, is for that central coordinating hub to create a set of goals and drivers that are core to the organization, right? So these are the things that we really care about and that we need to address right now. And it goes through, and one of the ways that AHP works is it takes your leadership through a very structured process that really gets good buy-in, gets a really good, roundtable view of the decision they're making, and gets really good buy-in. So you go through that structured process, and you end up with a set of weighted criteria, weighted goals that you can use to evaluate projects. And then if we come down a level, down from the central hub down to the vendor team, how does that play out? Well, they can take those central criteria and create for themselves a subset a tailored set of criteria from them. So they can drill into secure the future, for example, and break it down into things like protecting our buying power and so on, right? So they can take this idea of secure the future, and they can turn it into stuff that's actionable, criteria that are actionable in the domain of vendors. And the store operations people would do the same thing in the domain of store operations. And so this becomes, because they've got the same core values, secure the future, survive the present, and so forth, it means that they can exercise governance, they all speak the same language, and they can communicate horizontally with each other as well. So these criteria become a mechanism whereby you can very quickly communicate, I'm the vendor team, these are my goals, these are my drivers. The nerve center can look at those and say, yep, those are great, go for it, right? So they're exercising good governance. And the store operations team can say, well, that third criteria that you've added in there, that's directly opposing, that's going in the opposite direction to this criterion I've got here. So we're not even thinking about projects yet. We're just getting people aligned in terms of where they're going. And that can save all kinds of problems later on. So by drilling down into those top level goals and eliminating criteria that don't apply, we can really drive clarity, transparency, good governance, and rapid decision making. And it's all because you have a good, solid framework for doing it. And then, of course, you go into ideation. So, within that vendor team, you might ask, you might have an ideation page where people can say, hey, we've got a risk here, we've got a risk here, we've got a risk here. And then you can prioritize those risks using this AHP process. So it's basically like a weighted spreadsheet with added decision science magic. Conceptually, it's the same thing. You have criteria and you score your in this case, we're scoring risks. And we can prioritize the risks to see which ones could have the most impact on the business. And then you can figure out, okay, with our top risk, what are the possible ways of solving it? And which of those solutions is going to add the most value the quickest, right? So you can then use the same structure, the same decision-making structure that's transparent, right? So from a governance point of view, we can see why we're making, not just that we're making decisions, we can see why we're making decisions. And because we have these criteria which are acting as a coordinating mechanism, we can communicate really quickly what we're doing and why, so that we can come up within each of those groups with our own portfolio of proposed interventions, right, really quickly. And then what's really key is to be able to bring those interventions together, to bring those groups together, so the vendor group and the store operations group and the logistics group, bring them together to very quickly review their proposed interventions and to look for synergies, to look for conflicts, things that could mess each other up. And to make sure that everything is being kind of reviewed quickly with rapid decisions, but ensuring that good governance and alignment. And when you do that, it lets you achieve more, right? There's less conflict, and so you can get more done. And in a crisis situation, that's crucial. And so, and just as an example, what that lets you do, if you use this very structured way of looking at the response to a crisis like COVID, it lets you do things like have one group, the store operations group here on the left, they've identified an intervention that within their domain would have a high impact, and it would have that impact really quickly. Right? That's a really good intervention. But what we see is that same intervention scores badly over here for the logistics team. Right? So suddenly that's instantly in real time visible to the group. So now we can have a really quick discussion that says, okay, is that a problem for the logistics team because it's going to disrupt something you were planning, or is it just that you don't really care, right? And if we don't really care, then great, let's green light this and go ahead. So by putting in place just a little bit of structure, you can avoid all kinds of conflicts later on, and just get more done. Now, again, I come back to where I started really and say, look, this is all about methodology, and it's about tools, and it's about process, and it's about making the delivery of what are effectively projects more effective. Right now, there are two aspects to that. One is delivering the projects, and the PMO can step in and do that, and with the help of iCoTech, get good PPM tools to help you deliver the projects. And the second piece is to make sure that you're delivering the right stuff, and that's where I think the PMO can add huge amounts of value. So I think not only do I think the PMO can add value here, I think there's an obligation for the PMO leadership to step up and step beyond, step out of the comfort zone, and really push to help these your decision makers across the organization who are really trying to assimilate information and structure decisions and do all of this all in real time. If you can provide the structure that helps them do that more effectively and more quickly, then you're going to get better decisions. Free them up to focus on decision making rather than on trying to figure out how to make decisions. And that's what PMOs do all the time, both in the prioritization process and in project implementation. Right? It's about trying to find the right balance of standardizing methodologies and making sure the methodologies don't get in the way, but they're enablers and all that kind of good stuff. Finding best practice. So I think this is an area where the PMO can actually step up and help those decision makers be more effective. And this isn't really about your PMO's KPIs and your PMO metrics. This is about people's lives. It's about society as a whole. And that's why I think we all have an obligation to do everything that we can to help those executives be effective. And in normal times, right, if you're wasting 20% of your resources, which was the figure from the PMI, if you're wasting 20% of your resources, that's bad enough, right? That's wasteful, and we shouldn't do that. But when you're in a crisis where people's lives are at stake, when you're in a crisis where the actions we take now will affect certainly the economy for the next couple of years, and probably the way that society operates for the next couple of years, are going to be driven by the decisions we make right now. So wasting 20% of resources now is unforgivable, right? We can't afford it as organizations, as individuals, and as a society. So, but this stuff is difficult to do, right? That's why we as an industry, we waste 20% of our resources. And so, kind of the right digital tooling can help you align across your teams. It can help coordinate, and can be the thing that is the special sauce that empowers the PMO to help the organization become more effective. And that's really why at TransparentChoice we've made the decision for the next few months to basically give our software away. We've made the decision that supporting the society is far more important than our bottom line and our revenue goals for the year. And so we are making our software for free to help reduce the impact, both medical, social, economic impacts of this crisis. So if you'd be interested in stepping up and helping your organization really accelerate and focus and prioritize the interventions that are really going to make a difference in a coordinated and aligned way, just reach out and let us know. You can do that through iCoTech, through Joel, or you can email me directly, or go to that web link, and there's more information over there. So that's about it. Thank you all very much. Joel, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Stuart. Much appreciated. So I know there's a lot of people on the call today, so if anybody has any questions, we'd like to open up the call to anybody who has any questions for myself or Stuart. So yeah, any questions at the outset?
Goodness,
Okay.
we've stunned everybody into silence. That's
yeah. Yeah, indeed. But hopefully people have, if you've got any questions, then later on, please do drop me an email or Stuart an email. You've got our details. And Geraint, do you want to kind of hand over to you to close us out and to summarize?
There is actually a question there about how would you start with AHP today? I think the first thing would be go get yourself a good tool. And then the second thing would be to really sit down and have a look at it and understand how you would deploy it. So for me, it would be about finding the quick win. So maybe it's in that nerve center, or maybe there's one piece of the business that's focused on response to COVID. And I would start there and just go in and say, right, how can I help you figure out what you need to do, what you can safely stop doing, and then when you're ready, we'll think about transitioning. So I would start there.
Cool. Good question. Yes, so we've got a question there about the presentation. So everybody will get a copy of the presentation. This is being recorded as well, so it'll go up on the iCoTech YouTube channel. So we'll send you a link to that as well, where you can find other events from the portfolio delivery community and other sessions that have happened over the last 4 weeks. So yeah, Geraint, are you okay to close us out?
Hi, Joel. Thank you both for that. What I'm going to do now is just going to try and unmute all.
Is now exiting.
Which I can't actually. So if you do have a question that you verbally want to put across, please unmute yourself and shout out. So I'll give it a couple more minutes and try and close this off. Yeah, as Joel said, we are going to share this presentation. I'll send you out an email afterwards. We'll also be looking at creating a community group as well, which again we will share with you, so we can share resources, share questions after this event and between events. So yeah, I think any tips on, there's another one as well from Julian. Sorry, any tips on prioritization tool sets in general, please?
Sure. So there are basically so the most common methods that we see, let's put it this way, are beauty shows. So Dragon's Den, let's go in and pitch our ideas. That is dreadful and is highly ineffective. So if you're doing that, please stop. The next most common, I think, is sort of weighted spreadsheets, things like that. And if you have a really good facilitator, that can work. But the problem is when you're working with weighted spreadsheets is that you get lots of follow my leader and political wangling going on. So, if you think about the meeting where you put a bunch of criteria up on the whiteboard and you say, great, what weight should we give this criteria? And, the most senior person in the room says, oh, I think that should be a 25% weighting. Now, there are two problems with that. First of all, that number, psychology research has pretty much proved at this point that number is meaningless. It's just being plucked out of midair. And the second problem is that now everyone else around the table isn't thinking about what should the number be. They're thinking, gee, do I want to take on the most senior person in the room? So suddenly it's a political debate rather than a rational debate. And so the problem is that then everyone leaves the room knowing that whatever model they just came up with for prioritization is wrong. So weighted spreadsheets kind of fall apart because there's no structure for getting alignment between your leadership team before you start scoring projects. And effectively, the better PPM tools, and there are a few of them that do prioritization, really all they do is the exact same thing. They do weighted scoring, just like you would in a spreadsheet, and they maybe have some nice pretty pictures. So they fall down in the same way. So there are 3 vendors that I'm aware of that do this AHP thing very well. There's ourselves. There's a company called Decision Lens and a company called Expert Choice. And so if you want to try and do it well, I would go and look at those three and get started. Get started that way. But typically the PPM tools are quite weak in this area, Julian. And they sort of assume that you've done the hard bit, which is getting your executives aligned on what they're trying to achieve. And most PPM tools assume that you've already scored projects, and they, when they say we do prioritization, very often what they mean is we have a field into which you can put a number that represents prioritization. So generally PPM tools are very, very weak. Actually, Project Server is one of the better ones. So it's a good tool. And then Project Server has a really good capability of then taking those prioritized tools and turning them into resourced projects, which is kind of the next thing you want to do. So that teaming of Project Server with TransparentChoice works pretty well.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart. I think there's two addressed to you, Joel, from William and one from Jonathan. So do the reports demonstrated provided out of the box for Project Online? And then, sorry, can I just ask? Yeah, go on then. Answer that one first.
So yeah, so there are out of the box reports for Project Online, but iCoTech have a set of reports that we've built that are almost our standard, which are the ones I showed you on the screen earlier on. So if anybody wants to see those or make use of those, we're more than happy to share them. Yeah, so get in touch and we'll be able to deploy those or send over the PBX files to yourselves.
Okay, and then Jonathan, any idea of the cost model for Project Online? We are all on 365, looking at PPM tools. The Microsoft one was unknown to me. So thank you for that question. Yeah,
thanks, Jonathan. As we often find many of our customers never knew that Microsoft had a PPM tool. So yeah, it's there's a few license tiers. They start off at £7 per month per user. But you obviously got to have Office 365, as well. So if you're an organization that's using Office 365, then you can make use of Microsoft Project Online for the starting price of the license is £7 a month. And then I think the top license is £40 a month, but all of our customers have one or two of those licenses because that's for a portfolio manager or head of projects or something like that. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And Jonathan, Garrett, I'll send you a note afterwards as well. So if you wanted to connect and reach out, we're more than happy to go through it in more detail with you.
Thank you, Joel. I think that is it for the questions. I'll give it one more minute, or please shout if you have got a question.